So, in this video I'm going to review the Jaspers 4R120S keyboard stand, which you can see behind me here. Now, this is not just a review. I wanted to make this video for two reasons. The first is I cannot find a review of the Jaspers R series keyboard stands anywhere on YouTube. That doesn't mean to say there isn't one, but YouTube's algorithm obviously doesn't want to show it to me. So that was the first reason. The second reason is there are a lot of issues surrounding the purchase, the selection and purchase of a keyboard stand that I really wanted to discuss with you because I think it's important. So I have divided this video up into sections. Now, there is quite a lot to talk about, so if you have a look in the description you will see a list of timings for each of the sections, so you can jump to any of the sections that you want to watch or watch again. So this is the intro, this is the first section. In the second section I'm going to talk about why you might want a keyboard stand. Now, that might seem obvious, but to me at the time before I bought this it actually was not, and there are alternatives which I will discuss in that section. In the next section I will explain why I was very happy to find that Jaspers made this stand. Now, if you're wondering what the numbers and letters in the 4R120S model name mean, I will explain that, and I will also have a look at alternative keyboard rack and stand models in the Jaspers range. In the next section I will use my peripatetic light wave assimilation and storage device, otherwise known as my iPhone, albeit a very old iPhone. I will use that and I will give you a closer look at the stand. I will discuss the assembly process and also point out a couple of features if you are going to get this stand, or indeed I suspect any Jaspers stand. I will point out some features which you really need to be aware of. In the next section I will discuss the procurement process, the steps I went through to actually buy the stand. It was not as easy as ringing up for a takeaway pizza. Now, I am based in the UK. Spoiler alert, this stand was not available from a UK supplier. So that in itself presented a number of issues. In total, I was in touch with 4 companies in order to get this stand. And my experience with each of the companies was, shall we say, variable, certainly in terms of customer support. So I'm just going to tell it like it is. I'm going to tell you my experience with these companies, and you can draw your own conclusions from that. In the next section I will tell you how much I paid for this stand. Now, obviously the bottom line is a fixed amount, but actually getting to the bottom line was in no way straightforward. So I will explain the pricing process and the various charges which went up to make the bottom line. I will also include a price comparison in case you want to buy elsewhere or if you want to buy a different model stand. And finally, in the summary, I will bring everything together and give you my overall opinion of the stand. Now, in this section also there is some essential information for anyone who is considering buying this stand in particular, but also I suspect any Jaspers stand and quite possibly any other keyboard stand which operates in a similar sort of way. So that's it, there's a lot to get through. Let's get started. So, why might you want or need a floor-based keyboard stand, apart from the fact that they look really cool? Well, I can only answer that from my own perspective. Now, my studio fits into half a room, so space is somewhat limited and at a premium. Now, initially all my music gear was situated in the box, which I operated from this little desk, which worked absolutely fine. However, when I started to expand into hardware, I obviously needed more room. So I got this little corner desk, and you can see my burgeoning modular system on that with a couple of units on top. And I thought it would be a good idea to get a semi-modular keyboard to link into that. And then I got another keyboard and another keyboard. And at the moment I have 4 keyboards, a desktop module, a drum machine and a couple of effects units. So they could not possibly all fit onto this corner desk. Or could they? Now, I'm going to give a big shout out to AMS Stands. I think the company they operate under is Obelisk Designs. I will leave a link in the description. This company specializes in desktop stands. So I sent this picture of my corner desk. I gave them a list of the equipment that I wanted to put on the desk along with the relevant sizes, and they came back with a solution. I didn't think they would be able to fit everything onto this desk, but they did. It was a masterpiece of design. Now the company has some standard stands which we'll have a quick look at on the website. This is the company Obelisk Design. If you need stands to fit onto a desk, I can absolutely recommend you check them out. Here are some of the units that they produce. This is a 3-tier stand. That looks very nice, and I think this is one of their flagship systems. This is what it looks like populated. This is another populated rack system. Now these are obviously off-the-shelf solutions and you might find one which fits, but the company reckon that the majority of their work comes from custom design, and that's what they did for me. And it was priced, I have to say, very, very reasonably. I was quite surprised at the bottom line. And I was totally surprised that I actually managed to fit everything onto the desk. However, I was just about to pull the trigger on this and there was a little niggle at the back of my mind, and I thought about this, and the problem was not with the stands and the design or the layout, anything at all. The problem was that there was no room for expansion. Now that might have been a good thing. It would have meant I couldn't spend any more money on synths. Would that have been a good thing? I don't know. But there would have always been this niggling sensation that my setup was somehow limited. Now, I know absolutely it is not about the gear you have, it is about how you use it. But we all get a bit of gear acquisition syndrome, don't we, from time to time? So I just really wanted the option. And the only way I could see to expand the system was to hive off some of the keyboards somewhere else. Now, when you can no longer build out horizontally, people go vertically. But there is only a small amount of wall space here. And there is a limit as to how high you actually want a keyboard before it becomes impossible to use or play. Now, you know what they say, out of sight, out of mind. If you have to go and get a keyboard from storage or somewhere, find a stand, put it up, plug it in, you're not going to do it as much or as often as you would like. That's just, well, certainly I wouldn't. That's just the way it is. So the only solution I could think of was to put some of the instruments on a floor-based keyboard stand. That would free up the desk for possible future expansion. And if the stand was large enough, I might possibly be able to add more stuff to the stand. However, as you can see, my space is incredibly small. And the stand, even this stand as it is, takes up a massive amount of room. Now, all the keyboard stands that I was aware of at the time were A-frames. The stand that most people have in most of the YouTube videos that you will see, they would stand against the wall, but I didn't have any wall space to put one of these things. So I was left with the prospect of fitting an A-frame stand in the middle of the room. Now, this was far from ideal. I used the other half of the room for other things, and this would have just encroached upon it, so it was not a viable solution at all. So I searched for a solution for weeks until I stumbled across, and stumble is actually the word, until I stumbled across the Jaspers 4R120S. So how did I decide upon Jaspers stands? Well, I did a massive amount of research. I spent weeks, if not months, trying to find a suitable stand, and I just failed completely until, as I said, I stumbled across this particular stand. However, on the journey, I came across the name Jaspers from a lot of people on a lot of websites and a lot of forums, and the general consensus seemed to be that Jaspers made some of the best, if not the best, keyboard stands in the world. Of course, they are not the only manufacturer of keyboard stands, but I spent a lot of time reading reports on forums by people who actually had the stands. Now, some people on some forums have an axe to grind, but you can usually work out who they are by reading the comments. But most people have nothing to gain one way or another, so it's really informative and useful, I think, to read their opinions of the gear which they have. And undoubtedly Jaspers was certainly at the top of the list. Now, as this is a piece of gear that you are going to trust with probably thousands of pounds worth of synthesizer, it is not something, in my opinion, that you want to skimp on. So Jaspers was always at the top of my list. However, I couldn't get past this static airframe stand which was going to dominate the room, and it just wasn't a viable solution. Now, I searched Jaspers' website for an alternative, and believe it or not, I didn't find one. This Jaspers stand which I'm reviewing, and which this video is essentially about, cannot easily be accessed from the Jaspers website. Now, I stumbled literally across this particular stand on the Toolman website, so I went back to Jaspers and I clicked on all the options here, but the stand, this 4R stand, does not appear in any of these lists. Strange though it may seem. However, if you look on the right hand side, I'm going to blow this up a little bit. You can see a stand which looks suspiciously like the 4R model. I'll decipher the model numbers in a second. But no amount of clicking will take you to this actual stand. And if you sort through these menu items, you might think it would come under the 4 shelves menu, but it doesn't. Everything in this section is an airframe. Now, Jaspers also produce keyboard racks, which are essentially the same, only they have square ends. I just find this totally amazing and, to be honest, quite baffling, but it might in part explain why I have not seen any reviews of an R stand. Now, let's get into the model numbers. The model numbers are actually quite easy to understand. The first number is the number of tiers. You might get a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5 or a 6 tier stand. And my 4R obviously has 4 tiers. Now, the standard airframes are followed by a D. I'm not totally sure what the D stands for, but if you see a D after the number, that is an airframe. The R, I am assuming, stands for rollers, but in any event, these are the stands which have rollers or castors on the bottom. The next number, in my case the 120, is the internal width, so the inside of this stand is 120 centimeters wide, which means you should be able to fit in a keyboard or keyboards or equipment up to 120 centimeters. The actual outside dimensions are approximately 10 centimeters wider, so my stand is actually 130 centimeters wide with a working area, shall we say, of 120. And the final letter denotes the color. S is for silver, which is what I have, and I think that looks really cool, but you can also get it in B for black, and I also think that looks really cool as well. So that's essentially how to decipher or work out the Jaspers model numbers. So the internal dimensions of these racks of the A stands tends to be 100, 120 or 150. You can also check out the sizes and options of the keyboard racks, which are also available with rollers. So did I actually find a 4R120S on the Jaspers site? Well, yes I did. And how did I find it? Well, I had to actually enter the model number in the search box. Now, they do other R stands in different tier combinations. Not being able to access the R selection just seems bizarre, but there you go. So here is the stand. So I will show you around my stand in a moment, but I think you will probably get a better picture of the stand from the website here. Not least of all because it's not cluttered with all my stuff which is still in the background. So you can see the sort of dropped front of the stand. You can see it has castors or rollers on the bottom. Now there's one slightly weird thing about this stand compared to the one I have. You will see along the bottom there is a strengthening bar here, which is good to have. On mine, which you will see, it is located around here, and it is set slightly in. It's not flush with the back of the stand. Now to my mind, my stand with this slightly higher strengthening bar and inset a little bit makes the stand even more solid and stable and robust than this. But they obviously haven't bothered to update their images. So I found my stand on the Thomann website, and here it is. And Thomann have an excellent selection of images, so I'll just blow this one up as well. So you can see this is the same stand as appears on the Jaspers website. There is the rear reinforcing bar, which is as it is on mine, and the second reinforcing bar is right at the bottom. Mine fits around here. So you can flip through the images on the Thomann website if you want a better indication and a better view than you're going to get from my photography. And it has a close-up of the fittings as well, which is excellent. Now I use these images, believe it or not, to help assemble. Oh, we're going into 3D rotation mode here. Now I use these images, believe it or not, to help assemble the unit. It was not a difficult assembly. In fact, I barely looked at the instructions, which are fairly basic. Oh, and animated there, that's brilliant, isn't it? So you can click this and drag it around to view it from all sorts of angles. I think that's really good. Okay, so the construction was fairly easy. I tended to use these pictures rather than the instructions, but you can't really plug any of the poles into the wrong places. So construction was fairly easy. So I would definitely have got an A-frame stand if I'd had the wall space, not least of all because they are significantly cheaper. But you can see that Jaspers have an excellent range of stands. Both the stands with the castors, the A-frame stands, keyboard racks with the square finishes, and a variety of widths with tiers ranging from 1 up to 6. So now let's have a look at my stand. This is my Jaspers 4-tier stand. My studio occupies half a room. I'm still in the process of connecting everything together, so please excuse the keyboards and wires and just general mess in the background. I'm in the other half, non-studio half of the room, and getting the angle right is a little bit difficult, so please bear with me. So we pan down to one of the most important parts of the stand, and that is the castors or the rollers. You can click these on and off, and when they're on they just lock, so the stand will not move around. Now it tends not to move around much on carpet anyway, but it's a good thing to lock the stand in place to prevent it moving, just in case. However, I will have more to say about this later on. Now this is the side frame. The stand comes with these two side frames. All the connections, as we pan down, you can see the black plastic connections. These are fitted to the stand, so all you have to do is slot in the horizontal tubes and connect them and tighten them up. So the back stand is vertical, as you can see, and there's a strengthening bar right at the bottom, and one it's about 20 inches higher up. And we'll have another pan down on the front of the frame, and you can see that's angled as you would expect on an A-frame, and then when it gets to about 20 inches above the ground, the angle stops and it drops vertically. Now this means that the depth of the stand from back to front on the floor is only 50 centimeters. So if you are pushed for space, which I am, this is a saving of 20 centimeters. An A-frame stand is around 70 centimeters from front to back. So immediately this is a massive space saver for me. Now these are some of the plastic connectors. They're actually quite solid. You slide the tubes into them, and there are hand wheels or thumb wheels that you tighten up to grip the tubes. This is the other side of the frame. This is the thumb wheel which you use to tighten them. So we'll have a look around the front at the poles which hold the arms which hold your precious gear. Now the poles fit into the plastic fittings in the sides of the frames in exactly the same way as the support bars, but they have one additional fixture, and you must take very special care to install this fixture correctly. Now each of the poles has this little collar on either end. Now this collar has been fitted to the frame. There's no gap between the collar and the frame. Here is one I prepared earlier. I loosened it so you can see the collar. It's loose on the pole, and it has a small plug or protuberance which fits into a slot in the frame. So you push it into the frame and then use an Allen key to tighten the collar onto the pole. This has the effect of locking the pole to the frame, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by that in a second and why it is so vitally important that you do this correctly. Now I've tightened the collar, but I have loosened the wheel. So the wheel obviously tightens around the pole to stop the pole moving. But if the wheels become loose, you can see the collar locks the bar into place. It has a very small amount of give, and if you waggle the arms, then it will waggle backwards and forwards just a little bit. So if that happens, you know that the thumb wheels or the hand wheels need tightening. But as you can see, even if the hand wheels are not tight, then the arms will not fall because they are locked by the collars into the side frames. So that is why it is so important that you fit these correctly and tighten them correctly. Also, of course, yes, you do want to tighten the thumb wheels. It's a sort of belt and braces approach, but you do not want to be taking any risks with your gear. But having done all that, these things are rock solid. Now, having found what I deem to be the ideal solution to my problem, I just had to order the thing. Now, I'm in the UK, as you can probably tell from the accent, and as you probably know, even if you have been living on Mars for the last 10 years, the UK left the EU last year, Brexit. And this has caused no end of issues, not only for businesses, but for individuals like me and you who want to buy goods from the EU. Now, this is not a political statement about Brexit at all. This is just the fact of the situation. Hopefully it will get resolved sometime eventually, hopefully sooner rather than later. But at the moment, it is causing problems. Now, I found the 4R120S on the Thomann website. Now, I have bought stuff from Thomann before and never had a problem. Well, I have had one problem, which we'll get to shortly. But I wasn't sure about the ordering procedure, about the VAT and the delivery and so on. So I would have much rather preferred to buy from a UK company. Now, I could not find a 4R stand anywhere other than at Thoman's and through circuitous means on the Jaspers website. So I got in touch with Jaspers and asked them if they had a UK distributor. And they said, yes, it's DV247. So I thought, oh, great. So I sent them an email with a sales inquiry for this stand, and I never got a reply. After a week, I sent them another one, following up, and I still didn't get a reply. So I sent another email to Jaspers and said, look, this is your UK distributor. They are not replying to sales inquiries. Jaspers replied and said, give them a ring. Now, this did not, I have to say, instill me with confidence. I thought, what the heck, let's see what's involved with ordering from Thomann. Now, Thomann is based in Germany and they use UPS for their deliveries. Now, I've ordered several items from Thomann over the last 12 months. And the previous delivery before this stand was at the end of last year, and it took 3 weeks to get here. Now, UPS give you a tracking number so you can see where your parcel is at any particular time. Now, the thing is, after a week, this parcel had arrived in the UK. So it effectively took UPS 2 weeks to deliver a parcel which was in the UK to me. Now, whether they were using donkeys or electric scooters, I don't know. They were actually using vans because a man in a van did arrive and deliver the parcel, but I thought this was just shocking and totally unacceptable. So I sent an email to Thomann and they totally agreed and said, no, this is not acceptable. And to cut a long story short, they offered me a discount from my next order, which happened to be this Jasper stand. So again, this was delivered by UPS. Now, as well as the stand, I ordered 3 extra pairs of 40 centimeter arms. My plan was to put 2 SINs, or 2 bits of equipment, on the top 3 levels. So again, I got a tracking number from UPS. Now, I have to be honest here, the whole ordering process from placing the order to delivery took around 3 weeks as well. Now, I think only part of this can be blamed on Brexit, but I do know from talking to manufacturers and from people who rely on raw materials coming in from the EU that there were more problems than we heard about on the news. So perhaps it was down to Brexit. Anyway, it took approximately 3 weeks to arrive. But the point I want to make about this, and it might seem a small thing, but according to the UPS tracking number, it was going to be delivered on a Tuesday. One parcel arrived unannounced on the Monday, which might have been a good thing, but I could have been out, although under the present circumstances that was probably unlikely. So this was the frame, but where were the arms? Well, they actually did appear on the Tuesday, but the tracking system didn't work, so I really wasn't impressed with UPS. I have had deliveries from companies which will actually give you a 1 hour time slot, so UPS was out by a day. So okay, it might have been a small thing, but having had to wait another 3 weeks for a UPS delivery, it was mildly annoying. So talking about Jaspers, which we are in this entire video, before I bought the stand and after I bought the stand, I had occasion to email them. I think it was 6 times. I got a reply 4 times. 2 emails were ignored, and that led to a problem which I will discuss in a moment. Now, talking about companies and support and communication, I have to say that Thomann were very, very good. I had been in touch with them via email since the unfortunate 3-week delivery problem last year, and I always got a reply within 24 hours. So I have nothing but praise for the Thomann international support team who replied to my emails. Some of my emails, I think, were asking difficult questions, particularly about the VAT and the delivery options, which we are going to get to next. But I have no problem in congratulating Thomann for their excellent customer support over a period over 3 months. Full marks. Okay, so this is the bit you've been waiting for, the price of the system. Now, as I said initially, it is not quite as straightforward as it may appear. Obviously, the bottom line, the amount paid, is straightforward, but there are a lot of things which go to make up the price, so I will try to explain them here. First of all, there is the price of the 4R 120S stand itself. Now, Thomann's prices do fluctuate slightly depending on the pound and euro exchange rate, which is good, because when the pound is stronger, then we get a slightly better price, but it doesn't fluctuate by much. However, when I bought the stand, it was £265. The last time I looked, it was £263. So 265 for the stand. I bought 3 pairs of additional 40cm Jaspers holders. That's what they call the arms. I wanted to attach these to the top 3 tiers so I could put 2 synths or bits of gear on each tier. Now these were originally quoted at £25 each, making £75. When I came to place the order, I'd actually saved 10 pence per unit. So we have £74 and 70 pence for the arms or the holders. And that makes a total of £339 and 70 pence. I do hope I've got my sums right. If I haven't, I'm sure someone will put me right in the comments. Now, as I said earlier, I had a problem with UPS taking so long to deliver a package. Toman kindly offered me a 7% discount from this, which is £23 and 78 pence, which brings the total down to £315 and 92p. Now this does not include VAT, of course, so 20% of that is £63 and 18p. Now UPS charged £82 and 26p. That's a difference of £19 and 8 pence. Now, one of the initial problems I had when ordering from Toman was to find out exactly what these extra charges were going to be. They do list them on the website, although to be honest I found them a little bit confusing. But as far as I can make out, UPS charge an £11.50 handling fee. And okay, so they're collecting the VAT and passing it on to Her Majesty's government, so maybe that's fair enough. But they also charge some sort of other fee, which is around 2.5%. Now, I can't quite remember what this was for. You can read about it on the Toman website. But the figure seems to be around 2.5%. So as far as that can make out, there's no guarantee that it's actually going to be 2.5%. It could be more. So that was a big question mark over that, but I was hoping that the 7% discount would offset any additional charges. Now 2.5% of the total is £7.89p, and UPS only charged £7.58p. Now either they've been a little bit generous or I've got my sums wrong. Either is possible, but it seems that the around 2.5% figure is pretty accurate. Now, I do have to say a thing about this percentage. In some situations, a percentage figure is perfectly acceptable. However, I think it's unlikely that it costs UPS more to collect, say, £5,000 worth of VAT than it does to collect £5 VAT. The whole process is pretty well automated anyway. So why don't they just charge a flat handling fee, £11.50? Okay, that's fine, but to charge a percentage on top of that, I think, is taking the mickey a little bit. Although in this case it wasn't much, but you know, principles are principles. Anyway, the bottom line here, if all my sums are correct, is the total amount that this cost me was £398 and 18 pence. Now this was not available from a UK supplier, so it's difficult to compare that price with any other price. The only price I can realistically compare that with is Jaspers' own price if you buy direct from the company. Now there's two things I'd like to say about this. The first is the price on Jaspers' site includes VAT, which I think is actually 19% over there. And Jaspers also have a shipping charge, which you can work out if you go onto the site and put something in your basket and then check your country of origin. Whereas Toman have free deliveries over a certain amount, and this delivery was free. So by the time you do the pound-euro conversion, I think Toman were actually cheaper than Jaspers. And even with the additional fees charged by UPS, I still think that Toman is probably cheaper. Another point to note is that the Jaspers airframe, the 4D120S, is significantly cheaper than the 4R version. So you are paying significantly more for the straight legs in the front of the frame. Now why this should be so much more, it seems disproportionate to me. I'm just throwing that out as an opinion. If you have room for an airframe, a static airframe, then you will obviously save money going for an airframe rather than the R-frame with the castors. The keyboard racks with the square ends, you can check the prices online, they are more expensive again. And just one more thing to say about this, if you do buy direct from Jaspers, the company will cut the tubes to a custom length. So if you wanted 110 or 130 or 140 width rack, then you can get that direct from Jaspers. I don't think a retailer would offer that service. Okay, so let's summarize this. Now, I'll start by telling you one problem which I had, and this may seem silly, but I didn't know how hard to tighten the Allen keys or the hand wheels. Now, I had read a couple of comments on a couple of forums by a couple of people who said they had actually cracked the plastic holdings. Now, they were obviously in a very small minority. Everyone else virtually who I spoke to online about Jaspers stands had nothing but good things to say about them. But I did not want to crack the plastic by over tightening. However, I could not get an answer from anyone on a forum who could tell me exactly how hard to tighten these stands. So I sent an email to Jaspers, and it might seem like a silly question, but it isn't, and I will tell you why in a second. And this is one of the emails that Jaspers ignored or just didn't bother to reply to. Now, I do have a friend who has Jasper airframe stands, and I asked him about it, and he said, well, there's no need to make them too tight. You want them tight but not too tight. Now, the rule of thumb that I adopted for this was if you've ever tightened a wood screw, in some cases you can sort of feel that if you tighten it too much, you're going to strip the wood. So my reasoning here was to try to tighten these to what I would call hand tight. So they were tight and they had a grip, but I definitely didn't want to over tighten them. So I did this with all the nuts, and it's also worth pointing out that the side frames, which come pre-fitted with the plastic fittings, also contain tightening nuts so that you can adjust the stand. But these were not particularly tight, so I tightened these up as well. In fact, I tightened every Allen nut and hand wheel that I could find to what I thought was a good level of tightness. And the frame seemed solid, so I put my keyboards on them. So over the period of a week or so, I moved the stand around, trying to find the best plane position for it. I also turned it around with a view to connecting all the wires and the power supplies. And after about a week of doing this, I turned the stand around and pushed it towards the desk, and the second tier fell. Yes. So, heart and mouth, stomach on the floor. You can imagine how I felt. There were two synths on it. Now, the arms were not 100% vertical, or should that be 90 degrees vertical. They were on a very slight incline, and the lip caught the synth, so they did not fall off the stand. However, that was an absolute heart in mouth, stomach on floor moment, which I do not want to relive. So I took all the gear off the stand and examined the connections to see what had gone wrong. Strangely, I thought the collars on this pole on the second tier had come away from the frame. So as I demonstrated earlier, they weren't locked. There was none of this little giving action. The collars had come out of the stands, so the collars were obviously more loose than I thought. The hand wheels were also more loose than I thought. Now, when I put this together, I was very careful to tighten them. This wasn't just a little tweak. Yes, that'll do. These were hand tight. These were tight, and the frame was solid. So I can only think of two explanations. The first is that perhaps the fastenings do give after a little bit of time after being tightened, and you need to go through the fastenings again after a week or 2 weeks or however long and make sure that they are indeed tight. And the second explanation, and I think it was probably a combination of the two, is that when I was moving the stand around, even though I was very careful, this had thousands of pounds worth of synth gear on it, the movement had somehow loosened some of the connections. Now, this may have been because the connections were not tight enough to begin with. But in that case, if this was so important, which it obviously is, you need to make sure these connections are tight, or otherwise the arms will fall down and your gear could end up on the floor. So I'm really disappointed that Jaspers did not get back to me with an indication of just how tight these fastenings need to be. But I'm pointing this out to you now, so if you get a stand, even an airframe stand, I would say over the first few weeks you need to constantly check all the fittings to make sure that they are tight and solid. I still don't want to over tighten any of these just in case it has a detrimental effect on the plastic, but I am certainly going to go over these on a regular basis and make sure that they are hand tight and a little bit tighter. So I hope that is a salutary warning to anyone who has a Jaspers stand, and even I suspect any sort of keyboard stand which relies on hand wheels and Allen keys to tighten the poles and keep them in place. Now there is one more thing which I need to point out, and this is with particular reference to the R series of stands. They are on casters, and my stand, as you have seen, is on carpet. Now if you push this from the back from a hand position, it will tilt, and you can imagine how I felt the first time that happened. Although, as I said, it doesn't move very far, just a couple of feet, and I was very careful. Now this must be because the centre of gravity is further towards the front than the back. I'm not blaming Jaspers for this at all. It is obviously part of the design, but I don't see how they could have made a stand which was so narrow and kept the keyboards still accessible in any other way. So it is just something to be aware of. It's not a complaint, just be aware of it. And if you're going to move it, either pull it from the front or push it from the back very gently from a low position, and that should keep you safe. So in summary, you are now aware of all the research I did and how I somehow sort of mystically stumbled over this R series of stands, which is not directly available from the Jaspers website. But this stand fits my requirements perfectly. It is shallower than the normal A-frame stand, and it has the magic castors, which you still have to be careful with, but it does make it portable, which is exactly what I need to fit in my small half-room studio. Now, as long as you bear all the caveats that I've mentioned about the collars and about tightening the screws correctly and tight enough, and if you're careful about moving the stand, then I would absolutely wholeheartedly recommend this stand. Now, if I could have got an A-frame stand, I certainly would have done. For one, they are significantly cheaper, but for two, because you're not moving them around, I suspect they also may ultimately be more stable. However, once this stand has been locked in place, playing the keyboards, it is absolutely rock solid. It really is. So I don't have any worries about that. My only concern is that I make sure that the thumb wheels and the Allen keys are tight. So that's the story of my 4R120S Jaspers keyboard stand, which hopefully in the next week or so should be fully connected with the synths on it and up and running. So I hope you found this useful, and if you have any questions about the stand or anything that I mentioned in the video, then please leave a comment down below and I will reply just as soon as I possibly can. And if you did find this video useful, then please consider subscribing and ringing the bell. Thank you. It really does help, and hit the big thumb as well. But as always, I really do appreciate you spending time watching this video. So thank you very much indeed. And I will see you again in the next video very soon.